This video is sponsored by Current. Manage your money your way.
Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball, I got it!
Alright, look, listen. I don't need to tell you this. You know I love Dragon Ball, and contained in this video are the arcs that cemented Dragon Ball as one of my favorite stories of all time. It's such a magical and terrific world full of bizarre, funny, heartfelt, and inspirationally powerful stories, not to mention characters. And so today I'm taking an in-depth look at two tournaments in this story. The first being Fortune Teller Baba's Champion Knockout Contest, and finally, the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai. The first world tournament since the last epic encounter between Jackie Chun and Goku, and the first time we're introduced to the intimidating and arrogant Tenshinhan. Hold on to your socks, everyone, because we're diving in. I'm Toy Not Mark, and this is my review of Akira Toriyama's underrated and undefeated Dragon Ball.
Come on, Dragon, just for me. この胸は熱くときめく。勇気を出してfar away. Come on, Dragon.
Fortune Teller Baba. The Red Ribbon Army arc, while very action and suspense focused, I thought lacked emotional resonance. In the first and second arcs I covered in this review series, I mentioned how my favorite aspects of both were what they brought to the table in an emotional capacity. Goku sharing his memories of his grandpa in Pilaf's castle, informing us of his tragic circumstances, and in the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, Roshi's moving of heaven and earth in an effort to try and instill the right teachings in his pupils. These are all brilliantly subversive ideas that, in addition to the comedy and action, help to elevate all of the material being told far beyond what would have otherwise been achieved without it. Dragon Ball is very much a story of action and comedy, but without certain measured and appropriate levels of drama, almost all of the action loses its sense of weight. Tao Pai Pai's encounter with Goku was powerful because it was entirely driven by drama. Appa's father had been murdered, and so Goku had to try to improve enough such that the next time he fought Tao, he would be able to prevent him from doing more damage to more people. And driven by that emotional resonance, Goku rematches Tao to great success. However, as you may have noticed last week, I decided to quickly scan over Goku's attack on the Red Ribbon Army base, and I did so because that section was simply just action and comedy. There was virtually no drama involved, which I think is a crying shame. Goku just defeats the Red Ribbon Army, plowing through their ranks with hardly any resistance, and I decided to end it there because it was the end of the titular Red Ribbon Army for which the arc is known for. Well, for now. But what if I told you that wasn't the actual ending of the arc? One of the best aspects to the format Dragon Ball employs is that of using comedy and action as a vehicle for telling stories that have an emotional core. And while the main action and comedic climaxes have reached their conclusions through the dismantling of the Red Ribbon Army themselves, there still exists the emotional climax to this arc. While many might consider this part separate from the prior Red Ribbon Army material, this arc still very much is intrinsically connected to the prior. Having begun with a less compelling desire from Goku to reunite himself with his Grandpa Gohan's Dragon Ball, eventually he amended that desire in lieu of the circumstances that befell Appa and his now late father. Pushing forth with gusto towards Fortune Teller Baba's dwelling in search of an answer for the final Dragon Ball's location, this portion of the story reminds us that while the arc was named after the Red Ribbon Army due to its pervasive pushback throughout the material, this story is still ongoing, and at its core, it's yet to be resolved. So let's get to the core. Essentially, the long and short of this particular portion of the story concerns the retrieval of the last Dragon Ball. Where is it? The gang doesn't know. It's unable to be located using the Dragon Radar for some reason, and so they go to Fortune Teller Baba's dwelling in the hopes that she can locate the ball using her powers. This is our first time meeting this character. Her appearance is fun and quirky, and I just love the design. At first, this seems like a great solution to their problems. However, when the gang arrive to find out that they have to fight and defeat 5 champions chosen by Baba to get this privilege, the story once again turns into a tournament of sorts. Fans of Dragon Ball Super will recognize this knockout style tournament format as it was used during the Universe 6 tournament against the likes of Frost and Hit. Unlike that tournament and those fights from Super, however, these are distinctly early Dragon Ball in both tone and execution for the most part. I'll show you what I mean. First up, Krillin versus Count Dracula. Krillin opts to hop in to kick things off with this challenge in the name of the hero team, first against none other than Count Dracula. Almost all of Baba's champions follow this monster movie type theme, and the fight with Krillin has some terrific gag humor that actually got some laughs out of me. But through and through, there's not much to this fight beyond some quick laughs and the establishment of the tournament rules. Krillin loses, which means Dracula stays on, and up next, Puar and Upa. This fight is even shorter, though I will say its execution is cute while also making some nice use of some lesser utilized characters. Puar finally gets to do something, so that's cool, and Upa, the person that's dictating the story's conclusion, also finds himself contributing to the ending. So that's nice, and I thought their involvement was clever also, with Puar making full use of his shape-shifting abilities. Dracula's eliminated, and to make room for Yamcha, Puar and Upa step down. Next up, Yamcha versus the Invisible Man. This fight is a really weird one, and boy is it a time. So Yamcha, someone that's already struggling with relevancy in the story, finds himself struggling against Baba's Invisible Man. The only significant instance from this fight is the notorious Bulma's boob panel. It's a gag that drags Bulma and Roshi into the scene, and through the group's combined efforts, Krillin's idea lands a large amount of Roshi's blood over the Invisible Man, resulting in Yamcha then seeing him and taking the victory. It's one of the most bizarre scenes, and now we're switching the battle stage. Yamcha proceeds to the next round. His next opponent, the Mummy. Yamcha versus the Mummy, Baba's third champion, is perhaps the first major challenge to this group, and therefore this is effectively where the tournament actually starts. Everything leading up to this was preamble or comedic relief, and while comedy remains prevalent from here on, what with the battle stage literally being two giant stone demons sitting on toilets while tonguing each other, the rules to this one are simple. You fall off the platform, you die from falling into the acid beneath, and if you quit, you lose. That's it apparently. And in this fight with the Mummy, Yamcha is quickly overwhelmed, making room for our main man G that dons the orange gi, Goku. Goku versus the Mummy. There's some really nice panel work here and terrific use of the Mummy's powers to prevent him from falling off the stage. But in the end, this fight only serves to show one thing: how incredible Goku is and how blown away those in his friend group are at his overwhelming strength. In the end, Goku was too much. He advances. Baba's next champion is Devilman! The Devil? While brief, much like the prior confrontation with the Mummy, Goku's fight with the Devil is interesting for two specific reasons, I think. Firstly, this Devil individual, as Roshi points out to us, is normally Baba's fifth champion, which means there's someone special waiting in the wings to come out as her fifth secret champion once Goku disposes of the Devilman. It's a nice teaser for later, and at that point in the story, I was still none the wiser as to who that surprise fighter might be. Another aspect that I thought was quite cool, also kind of funny, was that of the Devilman's secret weapon. This beam that he employs enlarges the impurities or evil in one's soul until they explode or die. But what's cool about this is that it does nothing to Goku. He has no evil in him, and thus the beam did absolutely nothing. What I found funny, however, about this section was that of Baba's reaction. She seems to show tremendous concern for Goku's life and thought the Devil was going too far. And her feeling that way would be fine if not for the fact that the ring is designed to have people fall off to their death. If you don't want the fighters to die, then don't make the floor acid, Baba. But yeah, as I alluded towards the beginning of this video, this arc surrounding Fortune Teller Baba and her champions is very much the emotional climax to this arc, as well as the culmination of the through line to this entire story. Across its narrative, Goku has traveled far and wide in search of what began as loose reasons born out of sentimentality in retrieving his grandpa's treasured Dragon Ball, and has now evolved into a virtuous quest to revive a friend's father. And having now fought and dismantled Baba's Devil, her former #1 champion, we sit and wait for a surprise fifth champion to make themselves known to both us, the readers, and Goku.
あいつ、いい匂いがする。え？よくわからねえけど、嬉しい匂いだ。
This is one of my favorite encounters in all of the Dragon Ball story, including Z. If there's one thing I would have liked the series to lean more into later in its stories, it would have been a more relationship-focused story. From the very beginning of the Dragon Ball series, we've been made aware of the life Goku once had, and through this long journey, we've grown to appreciate and understand the little monkey child and the bizarre habits he possessed. He had no one, but over time grew strong and made loads of wonderful new friends. And one could argue because of the lessons his grandpa Gohan instilled in him. And having started off this arc in search of an item that represents his grandpa, in the end, despite having to give up that for someone else, he still got what he wanted in this scene. Goku versus his deceased Grandpa Gohan is perfect. From the subtle hints leading up to the reveal utilizing Goku's sense of smell, to Gohan reminding Goku to bow, all the way to the clever use of his knowledge concerning Goku's weak points. And while the fight is something in and of itself to marvel after, I think what I love most about this comes in the way of that subtle breadcrumb hint trail that leads to the outburst of emotion from Goku at its climax. He's most definitely not the sentimental sort, nor is he the kind to lament over or think nostalgically about the past. But in this moment, it's really brought to the forefront of the story that he's a little kid and he missed his grandpa. During a large portion of his life, all he had in the world was him. It's beautiful. And I don't think I was the only one who thought so either. I mean, with Dragon Ball Super paying homage to this very moment in Goku, while he was waiting for Frieza's arrival during the Tournament of Power lead-up, he relives the fight in his mind with his late grandpa by going through the techniques and poses used during the encounter. It's a moment that meant a lot to him. And when Gohan took that mask off, the joy in Goku as he bursts out crying and smiling with a big hug is enough to warm the coldest of hearts out there. He set out to find an important connection to his grandpa through the 4-star ball. He gave up on that goal for the benefit of another, and following that path, the young boy was reunited with his grandpa one last time. It's a beautiful story. Following the events here, and thanks to the help of Fortune Teller Baba, Goku manages to locate the final Dragon Ball, brings Upa's father back to the land of the living, giving him the same experience he had when reuniting with his grandpa moments prior. And before the Dragon Balls fly off, I thought it was a great idea to have him catch the 4-star ball. And with that comes an end to both this chapter and an era of Dragon Ball. For the next time we see these characters, it will be 3 years into the future, for the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai. One of the goals I set myself at the beginning of this year was to be more cautious with my spending. I'm often buying new equipment, new material to cover, and paying my employees to keep this channel running smoothly. NANI? Honestly, keeping track of everything is really difficult, so that's why I want to share with you my solution to this: Current. Current is bringing banking to the modern age and makes it super easy to track your spending with their super useful app. When you sign up, you get this super swanky Visa debit card, and then you can track your spending within the app and even set up custom limits or saving goals. Dealing with your personal finances can be a real pain, so having these features built in is a real blessing for me. You've probably heard of Current before from a host of other influencers, but to me that shows that they're really engaged with the Current platform and they are interested in keeping this service current. If you are interested at all in trying out this new system for yourself, click the link down in the description and grab your card today and bring your banking into the future. Normally, while I'm reading a story, I'll take a step back partways through and try to place myself into the shoes of the author. I'll ask myself how I might have progressed this story. What's the next logical continuation? And the answer while I was first reading this was, I have no idea. We had just received the payoff of what I consider to be the story's longest running narrative throughline so far in Goku reuniting and getting closure for his grandpa Gohan. This had been a question mark dangling over the series, and one Akira Toriyama slowly drip-fed information surrounding throughout the story until it eventually came to a head during the Fortune Teller Baba material. However, now looking back on this series in this retrospective review, I can identify what I thought was a terrific choice in story progression. From the beginning of the story through to the Fortune Teller Baba a saga, Goku dealt with the consequences of and received closure for a significant event in his life through his grandpa. It was a story very much centered around growth and finding friends through the things he loved most, like fighting. These were stories dealing with Goku's past and childhood development. But this next arc, marks the beginning of a new chapter in Goku's life. The 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai isn't about the past, it's about the future and the generation that are primed to inherit it. Immediately, what sets this arc apart from the prior is expectation. We've been shown how this format works, and we're familiar with all the hero characters that are participating and how they fight. And that might sound great and all, but it's actually terrible because there's no surprise. These were the hurdles initially in front of Akira Toriyama when sizing up an approach to this tournament arc. I've spoken in the past about what I love tournament arcs for. The action for me is very much secondary to the opportunities it provides the characters and the journey they go on within this framework. And because Roshi, disguised as Jackie Chun, led the charge for the narrative last time, in him effectively being the point of view character struggling against the odds, it's only fitting that he remains a driving force this tournament arc too, with it effectively being his swan song. But that still leaves a number of other characters lacking any sort of surprise factor. We've just seen Yamcha and Krillin get benched easily in the first part of this video, and so we need a way to care about them again. Well, during the closing moments of the last arc, they all come up with a plan of action concerning the next world tournament right around the corner. Krillin and Yamcha opt to train with Roshi, while Roshi specifically instructs Goku to train on his own around the world in the interim. While simple, this effectively achieves two things simultaneously. Number 1, it gives Krillin and Yamcha a chance to improve their standing next to Goku and the upcoming tournament. And number 2, having been effectively attached to Goku's hip the last while, we've become intimately aware of how strong he is as readers. So removing him from the equation and skipping forward in time after the mysterious training Goku's undergone is another great way to create anticipation and secrecy surrounding Goku's true strength level. These two modifications on the status quo following the last arc are important to take stock of and recognize certainly, but perhaps the most significant and memorable addition to this arc is through the introduction of one or two characters. Tenshinhan, Chaozu, Yamcha, Krillin, Jackie Chun, the newly invigorated Son Goku, and a nasty relationship between two rival martial arts schools in the Crane and Turtle groups. We've got all these question marks right before the beginning of the qualifying rounds. This is going to be a great tournament. The qualifying rounds. Dashing back onto the scene, having just apparently ran from the other side of the planet, Goku makes his presence known with little effort, qualifying for the top 8, securing a spot in the quarterfinals. The purpose behind his dominance once again continues the trend established in the prior world tournament that showed Goku not as the one to overcome adversity, but to instead empower him and to create a force for Roshi to overcome. At this point in the story, this is still very much where our heads are narratively. Can Roshi do what he managed to in the last tournament again? Can he instill the necessary philosophy and teachings in his pupil Goku? In this arc, it's also made obvious that certain characters have grown physically, sporting different character designs like new haircuts and new outfits, with Yamcha and Bulma making that the most obvious change. However, there are more subtle changes that I really appreciated too. For instance, take this image of Goku after putting his gi on in this arc. Nothing to write home about, right? He looks about the same as he did before, you might think. Well, he's actually a decent bit taller. The pose he takes here in this panel is drawn specifically to evoke memories of an earlier panel during the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, wherein Goku, assuming the exact same pose around that same time in the tournament, demonstrates his appreciation for the clothing. Compare both of these panels and you'll see for yourself the difference in Goku's new, older character design. I think what this tournament offers that the others didn't is a wider variety of significant things to concern ourselves with as readers. We want to know what Yamcha and Krillin are capable of, we want to see Goku's new power, and we want to see how Jackie Chun will contend with the up-and-coming generation. But really, the wrench that's thrown into this cacophony of conflict has to be Tenshinhan, Chaozu, and the Crane School. Chaozu is creepy, the Crane Hermit is cruel, and Tenshinhan is the embodiment of their collective teachings. And how this individual imposes his will on all the questions we have concerning the Turtle School is what brings about the best in this story, with him immediately setting his sights on Yamcha and Chaozu, Krillin. And because of this, we immediately have something to sink our teeth into narratively for the quarterfinals. Yamcha versus Tenshinhan. This fight having been made because Tenshinhan told Chaozu to force the numbers fighters would choose using his psychic abilities is another example of Tenshinhan forcing his will on the tournament's activities. And while Tenshinhan does win this fight, he gets the first indication that this group of turtle students aren't your ordinary adversaries. At least not the sort he thought he would encounter here, with Yamcha using effectively his entire arsenal as well as a surprise to both Tenshinhan and to us when he produces an exceptional Kamehameha. The choreography and use of space in this fight is something else, with the companion fight in the anime sporting some outstanding animation and artwork. It's clear to see how far everyone in this tournament has come since the last one, with the level of fighting prowess on display throughout. However, in the end, Tenshinhan comes out victorious. Satisfied with the result, having thought Yamcha was the school's best competitor given his age, he sets his sights on what he perceives to be the only other challenger that's worthy of his time, the winner of the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, Jackie Chun, as he squares off against his quarterfinals adversary, Manwolf. Manwolf versus Jackie Chun. Of all the early matches that have focused on comedy throughout this story, I think Manwolf vs. Jackie Chan is one of the greats. It's by no means visually interesting or combatively close. Instead, it's a short, funny encounter that establishes a premise, plays with it, and eventually pays it off never to be seen again. It exists to communicate a short joke, and it's great at being that, I think. Essentially, this dude Manwolf is a reverse werewolf in that it takes a full moon for him to turn into a human again, and thus he's furious with Jackie Chun for blowing up the moon in the prior tournament, allowing him to never become a human again, it seems. It's a ridiculous premise, but one that breeds a lot of fun. I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it. Chaozu versus Krillin. This fight right here is where Tenshinhan starts to reevaluate his assessment of these fighters and begins acknowledging their abilities in their own right. More so with Goku, but this fight has some stuff too worth discussing. I think this might be the only fight Chaozu participates in where he looks in any way threatening. Toriyama really leans into his creep factor, particularly in how he communicates his sudden and quick movements. That coupled with some unconventional and never before seen attacks, Krillin finds himself on the back foot time and time again. However, thanks to his ability to think on his feet and Chaozu's inability to do so, Krillin confuses the little psychic long enough to score the victory. It's not a super impressive fight by any means, but there's some funny jokes and it really leans into Krillin being more of a strategist than an actual fighter. Panput vs Son Goku. Something I neglected to mention during Goku's qualifying matchups was that he matched with a former winner of the tournament and in the blink of an eye eliminated him with absolute ease. This trend continues with the character of Panput, a prodigy pegged to be the next best thing in the martial arts world. And with all of the promise and accolades attached to his name, Goku, once again without any trouble, totally dismantles him in front of everyone, securing his trip into the semifinals of this tournament alongside the likes of Jackie Chun, Tenshinhan, and Krillin. What I like about the ending of this fight was that it mirrored Tenshinhan's qualifying display, where all the turtle students remark at the number of strikes he lands leading to his opponent's loss. In that same way, with Goku's victory, Tenshinhan remarks in amazement at the speed and number of strikes Goku lands to secure his victory. In this moment, Tenshinhan recognizes Goku as something special, but he's still not impressed. The semifinals. These semifinals are a star-studded affair, fondly remembered in the annals of Dragon Ball history, or at least they very well should be. Featuring fights between Goku and Krillin and Tenshinhan and Jackie Chun, they are both terrific fights with a lot of narrative and emotional weight behind them, and for me, these semifinal fights are the anchor of this entire arc. Here's why. Tenshinhan versus Jackie Chun. A significant driving force behind the actions Tenshinhan and the Crane School take is that of dominance. Tenshinhan has been taught to crush and has been encouraged to humiliate anyone that would dare think they could be superior to him. And I personally think that specific aspect of his character, that character flaw, is precisely why this fight against Roshi is one of the best in the series and the perfect send-off to the Jackie Chun persona. A running theme that's been following Roshi like a shadow as he engages in training with his pupils and the various tournaments has been that of succession and responsibility. Since the story began, he's been the almost reluctant holder of the title responsible for the Earth's well-being. It's a responsibility that's become his through the strength he sought to achieve in his youth. And keeping all of that in mind, it recontextualizes to a certain extent his teachings with Krillin, Goku, and Yamcha. As soon as Goku releases his first Kamehameha, Roshi acknowledged Goku as special and came out of his isolationist lifestyle to once again engage with what he believed to be a promising new generation. And in pulling that thread, it led him to this fight with Tenshinhan, once again in a tournament to help foster the next generation. Only this time, something feels different. Throughout the battles he's witnessed during the build-up to this tournament, as well as Baba and before, Roshi has consistently been blown away by what others, predominantly Goku, have been able to do. And right before he goes to face off against Tenshinhan, he takes the time to have this interaction with Goku and Krillin concerning Panput.
アンプットは確かに恐ろしいまでの達人じゃが、それはあくまでも常識的なレベルから見ての話。それほどお主たちは常識を超えた強さを身につけたということになるんじゃ。
And so, going into this battle against Tenshinhan, all he needed was a little push, and a push Tenshinhan most certainly gave him. This battle is awesome. Roshi once again is forced to get serious and throw out all sorts of tricks to push Tenshinhan until Tien shows him something he wasn't expecting. The choreography in this battle is stupendous, and what's more is, Roshi takes this as an opportunity to try and convince Tenshinhan that his talents are better served elsewhere. Punctuated with a choice from Roshi as impactful and surprising for Tenshinhan as it was for Goku and the guys in the back, he exits the ring, leaving Tenshinhan with the knowledge that he did so without using his full power. Brilliant fight, brilliant story.
私はるばる東の村からやってまいりましたクリリンと申します。お前の頭パチンコの玉みたいだな。これで憲法教えてくれるだろ。かっこいいな。あんなやつ大したことないぞクリリン。一発だよ。悟空。
Krillin vs. Son Goku.
ロマンのつかみ取れ天下一
A brilliant piece of dialogue that caught my attention was something Roshi said to Tenshinhan during Goku and Krillin's fight, as well as Ten's response.
確かにあのまま戦っておってもわしが負けておったじゃろうな。
This is something I think modern Dragon Ball loses sight of personally. With the introduction of characters like Vegeta later on down the line, the narrative flirts with the notion that pride is not only okay, but it's a path that's worthy of going down. When in reality, pride is nothing but the source of shame, and it is precisely what this moment between Tenshinhan and Roshi points out. I honestly missed this philosophical angle the story would take, and its positioning within the opening of Krillin and Goku's first ever match was something I thought perfectly echoed that scene's sentiments, as his two students proceed into battle not with the sole ambition of winning or being the strongest, but to instead test their abilities against someone they respect. Taking all of this in, it's wonderful getting to see Roshi exiting these semi-finals following a loss, not with a sense of disappointment or shame, but instead with a feeling of deep comfort, knowing that the future is bright with these impressive individuals leading the charge. And speaking of those leading the charge, Goku's fight with Krillin is something to behold. The camaraderie demonstrated both off and on the fighting stage is heartwarming, but the respect each competitor shows each other is remarkable. With Krillin asking Goku not to hold back or he won't ever forgive him, and Goku claiming that this is the most fun fight he's ever had. Impressive in both the manga and anime making full use of their respective mediums, the philosophy surrounding this fight, as I mentioned, is fantastic, but once again it is yet another fight that has some stupendous Toriyama choreography, exploiting every angle and utilizing some unique uses for the Kamehameha from both competitors. Goku using it as a booster to give his punches more power, and Krillin using it defensively to create an opening for him to grab his tail, once again leading into the strategic workarounds in his persona. Unluckily for Krillin, however, in the 3 years since they last saw each other, Goku removed that weakness. And once that option was removed, Krillin was simply outmatched by the young fighter. Goku emerges victorious with a nice bit of writing between the referee and Goku to cap everything off at the end. The referee says to Goku, the next match is the championship round, would you like to take a break? And Goku responds puzzled, I don't care. Goku very much valued that fight, but it by no means pushed him at all. This next fight should be a fun one. The finals. Son Goku versus Tenshinhan.
よく見ておけ。こんな試合は二度と見られんかもしれん。始め！
The beginning of this fight is filled with strategy and counters. Initially losing early on, Goku, impressed with Tenshinhan's power and toughness, decides to push harder and harder, getting into an apparent advantageous position early on, as Tenshinhan in the air is primed for a Kamehameha, but Goku chooses not to use it. It's subtle, but I love this indication that he's taken on board different pieces of advice he's been offered growing up. As a young kid, he was criticized for not thinking things through and charging in head on, but right here you can see the strategy he's employing. He's aware that this opponent is powerful and has the ability to fly. He might dodge it, he thinks. This fight will be a long one, and he needs that energy. Towards the beginning of this fight, Tenshinhan, particularly when it comes to the vanishing technique Goku uses and has used against Krillin in the past, he immediately recognizes the move from the prior fight and counters it immediately. But as the fight wears on, Goku implements similar applied learning to the Taioken or Solar Flare if you've seen the dub, immediately snatching Roshi's sunglasses, allowing him to land a heavy blow onto Tenshinhan. I love choreography like this. It's massively fun, and I love the pervasive use of callbacks to earlier points in the arc. And further setting this fight apart, every fight from the qualifiers up until now have been relatively short, lasting no longer than a chapter or two, and so narratively, because this is given ample time to breathe, it feels all the more significant and huge as a final. It feels like a massive occasion. The fight isn't over in an instant. It lasts long enough to tell a story and for us as an audience to feel the rhythm of that story. Tien's impressed. Tien gains the upper hand. Goku's impressed. Goku gains the upper hand. But the real overarching story concerning this encounter, and really this entire tournament, has concerned itself with the struggle for Tenshinhan's soul. During Roshi's fight with Tenshinhan, a large part of it focused on Roshi trying to instill some sort of lesson in the young fighter, recognizing that he has so much potential as a martial artist despite his horrible master. And during this fight with Goku, his allegiances are tested in ways he never anticipated. This is an important moment, not simply because it finally creates a moment for Tenshinhan to distance himself from the Crane School, but instead because it sets in motion a trend whereby the villains secure their own downfall. Personally, I love this narrative choice, and it is by far and away my favorite narrative tool to dispose of villains, not just in Dragon Ball but the wider world. I first noticed this technique used in the film Tarzan as a child when Clayton, the story's villain, through his blind, hate-filled pursuit of Tarzan, inadvertently hangs himself despite Tarzan's greatest efforts to prevent him from doing so. It's a simple but massively effective tool that highlights the villain's flaws and amplifies the hero's virtues. And in Dragon Ball, later this technique will be used to bring about the downfall of the series' two most iconic villains. And right here in classic Dragon Ball, we see the impetus for this narrative technique. Master Crane demands that Tenshinhan kill Goku, not understanding his pupil or the honor he wants to conduct this match with. And despite his screams for murder, death, and revenge, he gets a Kamehameha courtesy of Master Roshi, sending him flying. I love this scene. Following this, Tenshinhan brings to light techniques Goku could never have imagined, sprouting two additional arms, creating instances where Goku can't defend himself, but primed us as an audience for swerves like Goku using his tail as a fifth appendage to even the odds. This is such a fun and creative fight, and honestly, it pains me that we don't see more creative implementation of maneuverings in modern Dragon Ball fights. They offer so much entertainment, and to think that these are concepts or relics of a bygone era is honestly quite sad. Everyone nowadays wants their latest transformations or flashy beams, but back here we had legitimate strategy using moves never before seen in the story. It makes the world feel so incredibly colorful. That is until the climax to this fight. For when Tenshinhan bellows the name of this technique, the color is zapped from the faces of Chaozu, Krillin, and Roshi respectively, terrified both for Goku and Tenshinhan. There are so many ups and downs to this fight. At this point, it's clearly the most intense in the series, made evident by the number of story beats and the fact that the stage has been disintegrated. But narrowly having escaped by jumping high into the air, Goku remains. Tenshinhan is drained, and Goku readies one last Kamehameha, the one he saved for such an occasion earlier in the conflict. But instead, knowing that Tenshinhan has an answer for that technique, as made evident in his prior encounters, Goku once again finds a creative use for the blast. Knowing that he can't fly fast enough to evade a blow propelled by the force of a Kamehameha, Goku launches himself like a rocket towards the weary fighter. They both hurtle towards the ground, and the first to touch down loses. Goku manages to expel just enough energy to put himself above Tenshinhan when... First reading this, I was stunned. Given the subject matter and philosophy of the prior World Tournament, it stood to reason that he would likely lose the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai. I mean, come on, it was his first, and that was the lesson of the outing at the end of the day. But to lose it again for a second time at the finish line, I was stunned. Every fight leading up to this encounter had Goku like a powerhouse steamrolling through the competition, and to have him lose here, albeit in a questionable manner, was stunning for me to read first time through. The fight was incredible. It had some interesting narrative choices and was the single best visual fight Toriyama had produced to date in my estimation. But, somewhat remarkably, this arc wouldn't be remembered for this fight, but instead remembered for its aftermath.
私はるばる東の村からやってまいり ましたクリリンと申します。お前なんてもパチンコの玉みたい。過酷。あんなやつ大したクリリンが殺された。
The unthinkable has happened. A terrific tournament has ended in tragedy. Next week, I will cover what many consider to be the very best original Dragon Ball has to offer when I dive into the King Piccolo arc and beyond. I'll see you there.
Shenlong は死んだ。